I started working on a kind of like a side script here, kind of like a one-off, just simulation script. So I wanted to kind of start thinking about characters and abilities. This is definitely not very in-depth. This is not very involved, not very complex at all, and I'll kind of go into the details of it currently, but also the details of how I'm running the like the fight simulation. Um, so the reason I'm kind of doing this is to just get an idea of how I can think about balancing the game. Um, this is eventually going to have to be kind of something that I really sit down and put a lot of thought into, and really test things out, think about how to test things out. Play testing is going to be, essential for that. But in the meantime, before I even have a playable game, I can essentially if I wanted to, I could essentially simulate everything that is going to happen in the game. Um, I obviously don't have what I don't have all that fleshed out yet. So right now, all I have is, just kind of some placeholders for abilities for each character, a damage amount, a cooldown amount, and then the timer attribute helps me manage the cooldown up in the code above, which I'll show in a minute. And then I have like a crit percentage, auto attack damage, total health. Yeah, so when I call the fight function right now, I'm passing some fight parameters, um, or simulation parameters. Right now it's going for 10,000 fights, and you can see this was the last output from the last time I ran this. Um, and I won 68% of the time. So it will pretty consistently be that. Right now, I don't have it printing anything. At first when I started out this script, it was very, very basic, and I was printing, 5 simulated fights, and I was like um, printing each attack, um, you know, printing, the player's, health, each attack and whatnot, just kind of printing all the details for each turn. Right now, a turn is 1 second, so it loops through, and for it's simulating a second, and every turn is 1 second essentially. And again, I'll go into the details above in a second here, but yeah, so right now it's going to pretty consistently output this, and I'll explain why I think that is. Well, why I know that is, because these are, obviously pretty static. Um, Values. The only thing I'm using to add a little bit of variation is this crit percentage. So every time I run this, it's essentially going to be the same simulation, just kind of a tiny bit of variation there. So all that's telling me, the fact that I have run this multiple times and get essentially the same results. All that's telling me is obviously the fighting simulation is not very complex. So just eventually, and here in the video in a minute, in a bit, I'll jump forward and show probably some progress. I'm going to add some complexity into it. But okay, let me go into the top and show you kind of how this is working. So at first, when fight gets called, the two characters are passed with the simulation parameters. These are just kind of helpful for the metadata, but the characters are really what matters. It's just kind of doing a little bit of reformatting to the abilities. And then it's going in, it's gonna, so each iteration while fighting, that's just, so every second, every tick, it's gonna do this. So auto attack, I'm just simulating an auto attack. Each player is gonna do an auto attack to each other and subtract their health by the other's auto attack damage. So it's doing that real quick, um, and then it's gonna pick an ability to randomly use. So I'm going through each ability and I'm seeing if the timer is equal to the cooldown. So the timer starts at 0 and every tick the timer goes up, and that logic is down there further. Every tick the timer goes up. So once the timer hits the cooldown, that ability is essentially available for the character to use. So I'm going through each of the character's abilities, seeing if it's available, it's off cooldown, and then it's going to append it to the available abilities for character 1. It's going to do the same thing for character 2. Just for some debugging, I'm printing out, throughout this code, I'm printing out some debugging things, and if a debug is on, then it'll show that stuff. But if it's off, it'll just show that nice loading bar instead. Um, yeah, so after it selects all the available abilities, it's going to go in and randomly select an ability to use. So that's a little bit of simulated variation as well. Um, so that's all I'm doing for that, just randomly selecting an attack that is available and then dealing the damage to the other character. Um, so then, yeah, same, or what am I doing? Then down here, yeah, then I'm going through each of the abilities again, and if the ability was the one that was just used as an attack, then reset the timer of that ability so that the cooldown can then be reset. So it's going to do that for each of the characters. All this logic is repeated twice for each character, or repeated once for each character, and then same thing or similar logic here. Going through each ability. If the timer's on cooldown, we're going to continue, or excuse me, this would be off cooldown. So if the ability is available, then we're just going to continue. If not, meaning if there still has ticks to go before an ability is ready, we're going to increase the timer. So this happens at the end here, and then yeah, then this is just some logic for checking if a character is dead. Very simple logic. And then I found some strange code to get um, some of these prints to print in green and red. So that's all that is. Okay, yeah, then the time integer is going up by 1. Like I said, time is essentially each tick, so it's not really a second, but it's like I'm essentially simulating, I guess, a second. So just every tick this goes up. And then I have the simulation speed. Right now I have that set to 0, but if I have it at like time.sleep as 1, it was going real slow. So when I was just simulating like 5 fights, I was going real slow. I was you know I was printing this out slowly in the console so I could kind of see visually what was happening as this simulation was going through. And then here's the debug stuff uh, for if the debug's not on, then it gives the nice loading bar. Yeah, so that's what happens when I run it. So right now it's simulating a lot and then giving that number. So yeah, I think what I'm gonna try and do, this is what I was kind of thinking about right before I started the video. I wanted to give a little background though. I think I'm gonna add some like player skill parameters to go through the simulation parameters. So maybe something like for each character here, some things to kind of randomize things a little bit more, and add some variation, maybe like a miss percentage or something like that for the abilities, or for the auto attacks actually, like an auto attack miss. So to kind of simulate a character's like skill level, because right now it's every turn you're gonna auto attack. If you have an ability up, you're gonna use it, and the crit percent is gonna add some slight variation, and that's about it. Um, but I imagine if I can add some complexity here, I can get some more interesting numbers. And, I'm never going to really use these to say, okay, that character is ready to go. That has to be play tested 100%. It might not actually even, make sense to be trying to get these numbers close to each other. I'm not really sure, especially if I'm dealing with two separate types of character. Like right now, I purposefully kind of made these two characters a little bit different. Trevor has a little bit more health. I have less. I deal a little bit more damage. He doesn't. Kind of trying to see add a little bit more, um, or add kind of categories there so I can kind of get an idea of how to balance two categories against each other. Um, it would probably make more sense to try and balance two categories two of the same categories against each other, like like low health, high damage dealers, because then I imagine maybe it would make more sense to try and get these numbers a little closer together. Um, but then, obviously it depends on the complexity of the game, because these numbers being close together doesn't mean anything if the number itself kind of has bad data behind it. So yeah, gonna try and just have fun with it more so than anything. I'm not really gonna use this as like concrete data, more so just kind of trying to get a general idea of balancing, um, maybe what numbers I want to use eventually in the game. Um, so yeah, I think I'm gonna go do that a little bit, add some complexity in here, and try and see if I can come up with something interesting, and I'll come back. Okay, so I added some player skill attributes. Uh, And like I said, all this stuff is really rough, so I'm not even using classes or anything. I'm just kind of playing around with it using some simple dictionaries here. But yeah, so I added some logic for, I'll show you up here. Um, I added some logic for um, if you don't miss here, that's essentially what this is saying. So it's checking to see, it's doing a random probability here from that decimal down there. And if it doesn't miss, essentially is what this is saying. I actually might find a bug here at some point, but 'cause I just finished this and was messing around with it. But yeah, so if it doesn't miss, then deal the damage. Otherwise, it's gonna say miss, and it's not gonna do anything. It'll still reset the cooldown and everything, but it won't deal damage. And then I did the same for auto attack. If you don't miss, and that has a different percentage here, um, or does it? Yeah, yeah. So. Yeah, just adding a little bit of variation there. And yeah, so I made it so that my percentages here are much lower. Trevor's are a little higher here, so it was pretty drastic in my score here. So if we were just, if we were the same skill here, this is kind of what I'm thinking would be, how the characters match up together. Um, Yeah, so that's pretty even actually between the two characters if we're hitting the same amount of times. Actually, yeah, yeah. Crit is for the character, not the player skill, so it's a different one. Yeah, so I guess this means that the two characters I have right now are pretty evenly matched. Um, let's say I was like, I never missed essentially, then this simulation is gonna show me win a bunch more. Um, yeah, that's interesting. That's pretty drastic. Let's actually try if we were both, um, you know, I don't know, let's do, just kind of messing around with it. I'll also be adding a lot more. Yeah, let's see what happens if I do it again though. 63, 36. Yeah, it's about the same. Yeah, so I guess that still will kind of be consistent even with these variations in here. If the player skill is set to be the same, then if I want to balance a character, a matchup, then that would make sense to do. But it also doesn't really make sense to be balancing. It probably doesn't make sense to have these characters do well against each other. Um, yeah, so I'm not really sure. I'll just have to keep messing around with this. Um, I kind of wanted to just jump into some code to do something a little bit different. I was kind of getting pretty involved in some of those PowerPoints and stuff. So yeah, I wanted to kind of get back into some of the code, mess around with something a little bit different. Obviously, this is not how the game's going to work. This is sort of getting into game logic. Um, that's something that I've been real, big on is getting into some of the game logic. Um, again, this is simulated game logic, so, the game isn't going to be simulated. The game is actually going to have to, have the mouse inputs and, run on the game clock and the game mechanics and, the game events, the server events, essentially. So, yeah, this is totally, not going to be what ends up, being, kind of how the game works. This is solely a simulation to kind of just get an idea of the numbers here. That's really all this is doing. And if I can add some complexity into it to simulate it well, then maybe that can just help me down the line. If I get good data, if I'm able to collect good data from the games as maybe potentially users are playing them, I can kind of get good data. Um, and I can kind of simulate using users data if I kind of have the outline of how that looks. So I don't know. That's obviously way down the line, but like I said, this is just to get an idea of the rough numbers and to kind of mess around with it and see the differences, between like a character with higher health but lower damage, and then the opposite over here. So yeah, I'll probably just kind of always have this um, in the back pocket over here just to kind of have on hand to mess around with. And as I get more complexity into the actual game, the actual gameplay itself, then I can maybe use this just as a tool to mess around with things and just see if I can come up with something interesting. So yeah, anyway, that's kind of all I'll dive into for this. I didn't want to make this too big of a deal, but I was kind of interested in messing around with it. It's kind of a different aspect of the project, definitely much different than the actual game design and development, but just something fun that I thought was interesting. Yeah.